Welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. This is the winning Warcry segment. Dan, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. I won't ever get tired of hearing that intro.
Thank you. Did you know that Jason wrote that?
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, what a talented gentleman.
I know. It's not just like a stock music thing. Like he actually wrote it about a year ago for our podcast as we were
Nice.
kind of rebranding a little bit.
Does he do a lot of music stuff?
Not a lot, but he is a man of many talents. So he decided to kind
Okay.
of put together. I know he drums. Like that's kind of one of his like relaxation things. He's got like an electronic drum kit, and
Oh, cool.
he'll like annotate. You know, he loves like Scandinavian death metal that he like
Okay.
drums to.
hmm
So it's pretty hardcore, apparently.
Wow.
Yeah, really
That's
fast, really hard.
that's cool.
So, speaking of Jason, we're missing him tonight. He is traveling for work. He is taking a red eye right now from Los Angeles to the Eastern US. And so he is missing our show, unfortunately. But I think the two of us can handle it. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We have the new box set that's coming out that's got Corn, Doggy Dogs, and Vampire Samurai. We've got some other Warhammer releases to talk about. But most importantly, and I know it's been covered in some other places, but we need its due diligence. We need to talk about the big FAQ that came out
hmm
that will, I think, drastically change the competitive landscape for us. So I'm really excited to dig into that. But before we do that, of course, let's talk about our hobby table. Dan, what you working on right now?
I'm a little overwhelmed, honestly. So we just had a little heat wave, a little February heat wave that
Mhm.
got the temperature up to 40, and that meant spray painting. So before then, I was like furiously building everything that was hoping to test out before Adepticon to maybe paint up for the tournament.
Mhm.
And so I got it all built and sprayed. So I've got a Lumineth warband I might play in the narrative. I've got some more Stormcast. I feel like I'm always drowning in more Stormcast these days. Um, ever since Dominion, really, because I picked up the that box that has all of the Stormcasts that weren't
Mhm.
in Dominion.
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
that holiday box. So I built that, and I've got that whole thing, and I'm considering playing 1K of AOS. The one thing I didn't build was the dragons, and now that I actually look in the Stormcast book, it's like to win any of the battle tactics, it kind of behooves you to have a dragon, even if you only have
Mm.
one. So now I'm thinking maybe I even underbuilt a little, but yeah, I've got a lot of things now that are primed and ready to paint, and we'll see what I get into with those.
So, how is it that you live in like northern Midwest and you don't have an airbrush?
I don't like it. I don't
Really?
know. It just
Like
nothing about it appeals to me.
even just for priming?
Yeah, I could see it, but I don't know. It's yeah, it's never appealed to me. I've never really been interested, to be honest.
So I love my airbrush just because I can prime and I can zenithal super easy,
hmm
like and super fast, right? I mean, I can generally prime a warband in like 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
And
can go way faster than that with rattle cans. I mean,
well,
come on.
that's a total zenithal, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but like for example, I've been working on bone splitters. I decided I'm going to take them to the competitive tournament, and so let's see if I can hold that up here. It's a
Nice.
little
Nice.
hard. Let me see. Hold on. Maybe that'll help. No, that's worse.
Ooh.
Okay, so but anyway, I got some bone splitters and like it's hard to see with the thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, what
We're
I
on radio
did,
anyway.
I know exactly. Well, this will go up on YouTube too. But what I did do is I basically zenithaled and then I um put down some kind of like a wash of like Bugman's Glow style, right?
Yep.
And then I dry brushed with some basically like the equivalent of like Ushapti bone, kind of like on the skin, right? And then I tinted it with my airbrush with Athonium camo shade. So
Mhm.
I didn't give it a wash so much as like a tint. Like I sprayed it very lightly, right? And so it just tinted it. So
Yeah.
you ended up with a guy that looks like this. He's like brown, more brown
Cool.
green, you know?
Mhm.
And then I dry brushed him again with the same kind of Ushapti bone and then did it with the Bealtan green to get some like nice color variation in there. So I really like the way that the skin has come out and the muscle definition and things like that. And it's not taking me too
Nice.
long because I'm not like, going each brush stroke over every single muscle. And they have lots of
Right.
bulge muscles, obviously, those bone splitters do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but then I'll go in with my, hand brush and, paint the straps and the bones and the teeth. And I'm going to give them like a white war paint on the face, uh,
Oh, cool.
hand
Okay.
style, right? So
Yeah.
I watched a great video of Vince Venturella the other day where you take like white pigment and you basically add a little bit of like flow improver in that to
Mhm.
really get the thick texture that you need. That's
Yeah.
thick than a normal
Yeah.
white, right? And then put it on there. So
Nice.
yeah, so I'm excited about that. So yeah, but I mean that's spoiler alert. That's what I'm taking to Adepticon. I think I settled on my list, which is a Savage Big Boss, a Gore Grunta with Gore Haka, a Brute Boss with the big chopper
Mhm.
uh,
Yep.
from the Iron Jaws, and then fill out the rest with a combination of Savage Oryx with Choppas and Bone Shields, and I think maybe one more boy in there because I had the point
Cool.
to upgrade him. So I like it. It's 7 models that I'll have.
Mhm.
I think is a good kind of. I think that's the average number that you need is about
Okay.
you know. Um, and I played it against a pretty competitive list the other day, or a variation of it, and I was pretty happy with it. I got rocked against a Chimera, but we can talk about like what that means later on when we talk about the FAQ.
Sure.
Um, but then I played against a Destruction Soup list that had a Gut Lord and a Rock Gut Trogoth and a
Mhm.
Squig Hopper and or a Squig Boss actually. Like it was a pretty nasty
Yeah.
destruction list. And they did pretty good. Like it came down to like the last what I should like I realized that I should have gone after a different model at a different time, and that probably would
Oh.
have flipped the
Mhm.
game. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it came down to strategy and tactics more
Yeah.
than the actual army matchup. So I was pretty happy with that.
And what did you say your leader was gonna be again?
He's gonna
Savage
be
Big
this
Boss?
Savage Big Boss, yeah.
Oh, cool. Alright.
Yeah,
Awesome.
he's pretty good. Like he's got a strength of 5 and a 3/6 damage profile.
Yep. Yeah.
So and he's 185, so he's pretty. I think he's pretty good.
Mhm.
I just like I really like the Bone Splitters Savage Oryx um with the Choppas and Bone Shields because they have a toughness 4 and 15
Mhm.
wounds for 80 points,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah,
think is pretty good.
absolutely.
I think that's
Mhm.
pretty good. So they're gonna be hard to get off the board for 80 points.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I like them. I like them a lot. So we'll see how it goes. I think I might bring a Darko Savager if I get into the Warcry Nerd. I'm still on the waiting list for it,
Ooh,
which is
okay.
so weird because I literally like signed up right after Jason, and Jason got in like a day after he registered, and I've just been
Mhm.
waiting.
Well, there's
So
always no-shows at those
yeah,
things, right? And
yeah.
so at the very least, you'll get in right at the end. But
Yeah, I'll come
yeah.
prepared.
Mhm.
And if not, I've signed up for some other events. I signed up for the what is the Elder Scrolls skirmish game that they
Oh,
have,
cool.
like the
I don't
call
know about it.
something like that. Yeah, I mean it's a new
And
game that came
D&D
out with
just
last year.
launched a skirmish game too, right?
Yeah, I
I think
saw they had
Onslaught?
events there at Adepticon, but they were totally filled up.
Yeah, I bet.
Like, so and then there's a Warhammer Age of Sigmar like narrative skirmish game that they had put together. It's really weird. I guess the rules for it came out in White Dwarf, and you basically play as an adventuring party of heroes against adversaries. So you only have like one hero model, and you
Mm.
roll and fight and stuff. It sounds interesting. So if
Well,
if the narrative doesn't work out, I got a backup.
nice,
Yeah,
nice.
so it'll be good. Anyway, but yeah. So sorry, that was my hobby table too. Talking about the bone splitters. Been working on them, so I'll have them ready.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gotta say though, I gotta plug the bone splitters box. It's a great box to get into Warcry. Like one
Uh-huh.
box gives you so many models.
Yep.
You've
Because
got
there's 20 of them in there, and you can
yeah.
get what, like 4 different things for each one. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the Savage Oryx with the choppers and shield, the Stickas and shields, which are basically spears and shield.
Hmm.
There's the Moor boys, and then there's the Arrow boys, right?
Yep.
And so you've got four different, and actually there's a fifth one that you can do, which is the giant Sticka. I can't remember if that's the name of them, but it's the dudes with like two of them and the giant spear,
Hmm.
right? So, and that's in the rules too. So anyway, what I ended up doing is I made two of these, big stabbas. That's what they're called. I made two of the big stabbas, right?
Okay.
And then I made three of each of the other ones with one chieftain out of those three.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like you've got four leaders, you've got lots of chaff, and then I picked up a big boss, and I mean um uh that's a pretty decent bone splitters list.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, looking forward to that. So
Yep.
yeah, very good, very good. Well, hobby table away. Let's talk about news, my friend.
Oh,
So
there's so much. Okay. Okay,
yeah,
let's hype ourselves up for this one. Which one do you want to cover first? Which bit?
so let's talk about the thing that came out today, because I think that it is like it's not as big as the box, right? So Games Workshop revealed today, and I'm gonna actually pop this up on the screen. Hold on one second.
Regiments of
Uh,
Renown.
yeah, so Games Workshop shared Regiments of Renown, and what they're really meant to be are mercenary troops that you'll use in your Age of Sigmar. My friend thinks that they're going to be like costed about like 400 points, and basically take up all of your ally slots that you can use if you're talking about like Age of Sigmar.
They did that
Um,
before, but they actually called it mercenaries when they did
yeah,
it. They did, what was
yeah,
that, like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago? I
exactly.
wasn't that into AOS at the time, so didn't pay total
They did it,
attention,
and
but
some of those things didn't work out very well. You're just like,
okay.
eh. Like
Like,
I
what are
think
we
I think
doing
a lot
here?
of people thought that they would get better allies elsewhere.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
one of the biggest problems is that it took away some of your command points. Like you couldn't use
Oh,
any command points in like your first turn if
yeah.
you had them, and that was like a big no, right? So but they are calling them, like you see this, Regiments of Renown, powerful mercenaries with skills that make them well worth the fees they charge their fair weather allies,
Mhm.
right? And so you've got 6 boxes here. You've got Elthwith Thorns, which are the Sylvaneth ones. Big Grix Cruel Shots, which is a box of for the Cruel Boys. Veramord Shamblers, which is zombies in a corpse cart. You've got Hagrak's Pit Beast, which I think this is amazing for Warcry. You have the
Yep.
Formoroid Crusher, the Ogreroid Myrmidon, and the Mindstealer Sphinx. Like you're talking about 3 of the major Chaos allies that are used there that are in one box.
And it's the
So,
perfect thing for a box split. So I'm gonna
yep.
be splitting it in my play group. We're just gonna buy one. I'm gonna grab the Myrmidon because that's the only one I don't have yet.
Oh, nice.
And then, each person who gets it is gonna grab one of them, and so everyone will have a brand new ally. So, and all three of those are pretty solid in
They
the
are.
game.
They are.
In 1.0, they weren't quite as versed in how to write rules for these guys yet, and so they were a little all over the place. Not all of them were as good as each other, or like you had the awkwardness of The Mindstealer Spheranx was just a strictly worse version of the Contorted Epitome from Slanesh. So
Right.
it's like, what are we doing here? But they've given them all pretty unique, pretty useful roles now in the game, and why not get that box if you're into Warcry
Yeah.
and split it with people? Obviously, you're not going to use all three of those allies at a time, but they're pretty sweet and they're definitely worth including in lists.
So I played against Casey, who is in our local group here, and he was running an Ogoroid Myrmidon and a Fulmoroid Crusher with his Corvus Cabal,
Nice.
and they gave him the
So you had
oomph
what, like
and
two crows
tankiness.
in there in the entire list?
He didn't have two crows because he only has one Corvus Cabal box, right? So,
Oh,
but
I
he
meant
had
like
base.
total Corvus Cabals
Oh
at
yeah,
all.
yeah. He ended up having. Let's see. He ended up having the leader, right? And then like two or three of the more chaffy ones, and then the two allies there. But I'll tell you what, like that Formoroid Crusher is hard to kill. He is
Mhm.
really hard to kill, and
Yeah.
he deals some damage too. So one thing that nice about him is he has his ranged ability that does some serious damage, and you get around the ranged attack rules because it's an ability, so you can target people who are engaged with your allies, right?
Yeah.
So or with friendly fighters. So
Mhm.
it's pretty beefy.
There's
Let's
a
see.
pretty good chance I'll be playing one of those at Adepticon. Yeah.
Oh
I've
yeah,
been
I'm
really
sure.
impressed with them.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Let's see. You've got the cities of Sigmar, Norgrim's Runethrong, which is essentially the dwarf pack,
Incredible. It's
and
all the dispossessed stuff you could want. I guess there's one box of dispossessed that's not in there, but it's got uh 4 of the 6 dispossessed troops you could play.
yeah,
And then you have a Rune Lord, which tons of people love as far as an ally goes. But yeah, every little bit of dispossessed, you could make an entire warband out of this and be perfectly happy. I just
I
love to
have a
see it.
yeah, and I have a feeling that that's going to be cheaper than the dispossessed start collecting box that's out there because that's going to like 115 $120 for the start collecting box. Now that has a
Yep.
gyrocopter in it, which I'm not in love with the gyrocopter in Warcry.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
terrible. The Warden
yeah,
King is pretty good, and that's in
yeah,
that start collecting box.
hmm
So you're sad to miss out on that. But
yeah,
otherwise, yeah, this is amazing.
yeah. This is really good. And then you have the Disciples of Zinch here, which is the Coven of Thrix, which is a bunch of pink horrors, a Magister, and then the Endless Spells for the Zinch, which Endless Spells obviously don't do anything for you here in Warcry. So I don't know how good of a value this box is going to be for the Warcry crowd. But I'm not gonna lie, I was seriously looking at pinks and blues for putting together a warband because I love that double split ability that they have.
Hmm. Yeah.
It could be really powerful.
Yeah, I think blue horrors are really solid. Um,
Yeah.
pinks. So the tough thing about that split ability is because it's on
hmm
a reaction, right? So
Yeah.
you want to bait the opponent into attacking things that haven't activated yet. And
hmm
pinks are just so expensive that it's hard to have enough activations to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but if you skip straight to blues, uh, you get a lot more numbers on the table, and
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to pull it off.
Yeah. You almost have to like move once and just be like, now what are you gonna do? You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like you can't move and attack or anything because
right.
otherwise, like they get taken off the board and you don't get a split.
Yeah.
So Um, but yeah, so there's no price on these boxes right now. We literally just found out about them today. What do you think? So let's kind of break down each box really quickly. We talked about Hagrax Pit Beast and the value that they have there, which is high. We talked about the Coven of Thrix, which is the pink box, and the Magister. I think the value is like low,
Very
probably on
low.
that
Yeah,
one.
don't get it for
Yeah,
Warcry because none of those
no.
models even though some of them are technically usable in the game, none of them are usable in the game.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
100% agree with you. I think it's low. We talked about Norgrim's Rune Throng, which is the dispossessed Iron Drakes and Longbeards and a runesmith, I believe.
immediately one of the
Um,
best Warcry boxes that exists. Yeah.
yeah, so super high on the Norgrim's Rune Throng. What about Varamore Shamblers? You got a corpse cart and what looks to be 20 zombies in there.
Zombies are perfectly playable and good, but
Mhm.
I mean, you're not going to play that corpse cart in Warcry, so I think and zombies are tough because they're perfectly good, but also I don't think I would take them over skeletons or Graveguard.
Yeah,
I mean, Soulblight Gravelords just has an embarrassment of riches, right? I mean,
yeah,
if zombies had their own faction, I'd be much more into this box, but
yeah,
there's just so much sort of chaff to choose from that they just kind of get pushed out at the moment. So I would only get this if I was in love with the zombie model. And
yeah,
personally, I mean, I find this corpse cart just kind of gross.
yeah. It's not my
It's hard
favorite.
for me to get into it. The
Yeah,
zombies can be kind of whimsical and fun. I like some of the trees growing out of them, stuff like
yeah.
that. But the corpse cart, I don't know.
So I 100% agree with you. What are you gonna do with 20 zombies in Warcry?
Nothing. Yeah.
Like you're never gonna use that much, and you're definitely not gonna use a corpse cart. You'd be better off finding some leftover zombies from a cursed city box, or finding a cursed city box and getting that, because that's got a lot more Soulblight Gravelord like options. You got several war bands in that Cursed City box that you could come up with. And I know that Cursed City box is going to be probably more than this. I imagine that this is going to probably be to the order of probably $60, in my opinion. This
Yeah.
box, um, and so Cursed City is probably, you can probably find it right now, like maybe, I don't know, 125 dollars depending, maybe a little bit more, but I would rather spend the money there, get 10 zombies, get 10 skeletons, get the Verksker, get a lot of different things. You could even use the main bad guy. I'm looking at him right now. Why is his name slipping my face? It's not Radagast, that's Lord of the Rings. Um anyway, you can
Radikar.
use you what's that?
Radikar.
Radikar, that's it. You can use Radikar as a vampire lord, so like you got a lot of different things. So I would pass on this. Like to me, like this is low. I'd put this on the order of the Pinks box as well. So
Yeah.
um what about Big Grit's Cruel Shot? So it looks to be 6 Bolt Boy skewers and 1 man skewer. Or 1
I
beast
think it's a
skewer.
really cool concept for an AOS box.
Yes.
For Warcry, I don't think I would, because really, Bolt Boy bosses are okay,
Yeah.
but regular Bolt Boys are not, and you can't even play the uh, the artillery piece, right? So
Yeah, it doesn't even have any
that's
rules.
yeah, so you can't really buy it for Warcry. Very interesting little AOS box too, though, because uh, there was kind of this dream that Cruel Boys could be this Castle Gunline army, and then they were just worse than every other Gunline army, right? And
Right.
so you just can't show up with an army that's just a purely worse version of both Stormcast and Lumineth
Yeah.
and Caradron Overlords, right? All
Right.
three of those just do the Bolt Boy thing better than Bolt Boys do. So if this is both boys but actually good, right? If because all of these get little buffs in
Yeah.
AOS, little abilities. If those abilities are enough to make bolt boys and killabos actually playable, then that's a really cool little AOS box. But no, you can't play it in Warcry.
So what's really, really interesting to me is that the um rules as they stand right now with the Auric War Clan Battle Tome for Age of Sigmar, Cruel Boys cannot ally into Iron Jaws, cannot ally into Bone Splitters. Like none of those
Right.
can ally into each other, right?
It's only Big
However,
Wah. Yeah.
unless it's a big Wa, right? Which is like the worst version of all three put together. You know? So,
Yeah.
So what's interesting about this though is now an Iron Jaws army might be able to ally in some Bolt
Oh,
Boys,
okay.
or a Bone Splitters list can now ally in some Bolt Boys, and you're adding in a huge uh or you're filling a huge gap that exists in the both the Bone Splitters and the Iron Jaws list, which is they don't have any shooting whatsoever.
Okay.
And now you throw a cruel shots in there that's going to have its own rules that technically you're going to make it a little bit better, right?
Mhm.
Like that might be interesting. But again,
Yeah.
AOS, not Warcry. I would not get this for Warcry at all,
Yeah.
like at all, right? If you want some Bolt Boys, look for the half of a Dominion Bucks that's still out there,
Yeah.
right? Because you can build a whole a Crew Boys list out of that Dominion Bucks half
Yeah.
pretty well. So. What do you think about Elfwind's Thorn? So this is a Sylvaneth box.
I think Arch Revenants are perfectly playable. It's not
Hmm.
the first place I would go in competitive Sylvaneth, but it's very playable and it's solid in any kind of casual game.
Yeah.
The flying archers, I don't know that you could really play more than one in a Warcry list because they
Hmm.
have so little output. They fly, the fact that they can just go to a point that's important and then stay there and just kind of pepper things,
Yeah.
perfectly fine for just one. Um, I just don't know what you're doing with more than one just because it's not enough output to be sinking a ton of points into. So I
Yeah.
could see buying it for Warcry depending on the price and depending on the discount if you were
Yeah.
kind of a completionist, but I I would not I wouldn't sort of counsel anyone to start this way or anything like that.
Yeah. I see this as not a terrible add-on to the Sylvaneth Warcry box. Right? Like if
Mhm.
you already have the Sylvaneth Warcry box, it
Yep,
has like tree or Spite Revenants and Tree
and
Revenants
3
and some
Kurnoths.
Kurnoth Hunters, and like you don't have the Arch Revenant, and you don't have these little like Flitwing things. Like, sure, this is like an okay add-on to it. Is this going to like take you from somewhat competitive to like uber competitive? Absolutely not.
It'll make your warband weaker. Now, it
Yeah.
will be
Yeah,
fun, and in
probably.
narrative stuff, it could be really
Yeah.
sweet, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I think as a completionist, again, I don't know that I would look for this. I'd probably just pick up the Arch Revenant on its own and look for somebody who's selling those Flitwing models like secondhand,
Mhm.
probably. That's what I would do. Because I imagine that again, all of these boxes are going to be priced around the same, and my gut feeling is that they're going to be about $60. That's my gut thought.
Yikes. I mean, that's not a price I'm interested in for any of these except for the dispossessed and the 3 allies then, if
Yep.
that's the case. I mean, it's a huge discount if that is the number, but yeah,
It's a huge, yeah, exactly. If you're looking at Age of Sigmar, right? It's a huge discount on those on the Hagrax Pit Beasts,
right.
like because those are normally going for like $30 a pop, right? $30-$40.
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if they come in around 60. That's my guess. That's my guess. So
Yeah. So
anyway,
we gave we dug into every little bit of these boxes and hopefully we've still got some left for the Bloodhunt box that just came
that's
out.
right.
Uh how I haven't heard your takes on them. How excited are you for these two warbands?
So that's true. I haven't been super vocal about it. So with the Blood Hunt, I watched I did watch the battle report on Warhammer Plus. I don't know, did you get a chance to see it?
No, I don't have Warhammer Plus.
Oh, okay. So I did watch the battle report. They looked interesting. The so starting with the Corn warband that we have there. Uh So narratively, I like the idea that you've got this like Karnak worshiping warband, right? Like it's
Yep.
not like they're just like, okay, well, let's make a run of the mill warband that looks like basically Blades of Corn 2.0. They're like, okay, no, like they literally like are worshiping the dogs. And so I love like the skulls on the faces that make them look like beasts. I like the dude who's running around like a beast and stuff like that. So I do like that aesthetic a little bit. I know some people were kind of meh on it because they felt like it was kind of still standard like Blades of Corn
Just
slash
muscly
Slaves of
corn dudes.
Darkness.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
It's much
Um,
less of a twist than Rotmire Creed or Jade Obelisk were.
I
That part's
totally agree with that.
definitely true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rotmire Creed might be the best warband that was put out like that with a twist, in my
Hmm.
opinion.
Yeah.
Because Scions of the Flame and the Spire Tyrant and all those guys just look like Dark Old Savagers with a little flair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Their own personal flair. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the models. I love all of those war bands, right? But I think Rotmire Creed had such a distinct flavor about them that was so different, right? It was Nurgle without being Nurgle, and yet it was.
Mhm. Yeah, if we're talking aesthetically, I think it's them, Corvus Cabal, and Jade Obelisk are sort of
Yeah.
my three top faves. But um, but as far as coming up with an original twist that's still because Rotmire Creed feels like they should have been part of Nurgle the whole time.
Yeah.
That's what blows me away about them. The Jade Obelisk, like they work for Tzeentch, right? They're breaking down statues, which does symbolize change.
Yeah.
So that is something that Tzeentch would be interested in. I get that. But they look amazing. I love them, but they don't necessarily feel like something that should have been part of Tzeentch from the get-go,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
way Rotmire do.
Yeah.
And so I kind of agree with you there in terms of just hitting every single part of it. Now these guys, these corn guys, um, I like them as a small little twist, but I do kind of agree it's not like a total reimagining that somehow
Mhm.
also fits, right? Like Jade Obelisk is a total reimagining of what it means to be Tzeentch, and I really like
Yeah.
it. And of course, everything we said about Rotmire. So the dogs are cool. It's a cool little extra thing you can be doing. I probably will grab these because I have a decent amount of corn already.
Mhm.
Just from I've said this on a few pods, but the Wrath and Rapture box is what got me into the game.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That was my starter set,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so I've got a lot of corn and a lot of the dogs. So so
Yeah.
it'd be wrong for me not to get the dog lovers as well. Um, but I don't think I don't think at least right away that I'll run out and get a second like box of them to start mixing and matching and doing the whole deep dive or anything like that. I think I'll probably just stick with one and maybe use it in sort of learn to play scenarios and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, so I again, I watched the battle report of it, and I thought it was pretty good. The Claws of Karnak, oh my gosh, now my memory is being tested. I thought that they ended up winning, maybe
Okay.
they didn't. It was pretty evenly matched between the two of them.
Hmm.
Here's though, Dan, I'm like 90% positive that everything that happens in those battle reports, especially for Warcry, are absolutely scripted. Like there's so many ways that things are going off at exactly the right time with exactly the right thing and exactly the right moment that I'm like, that doesn't normally happen in a game where like the dude who's able to use that one ability and he just happens to have a triple to
Yeah.
use it and everybody's around him, to use it. I'm like, that just doesn't normally happen there. Or like they have a quad at just the right moment to showcase that talent. You know
I
what I
think
mean? Like,
yeah, I doubt that they, like, sat down and wrote it beforehand, but it's definitely the result of neither player playing to win, right? It's
yeah,
like, "Hey, can you kinda play into this trap here?" And it's like, in a real game, your opponent would kind of avoid the area because they
oh yeah,
know that you've set this whole thing up. They're not just gonna because especially both warbands have an ability where you get a big AoE bonus if
hmm,
you get a kill,
yep,
and those are fine. They're
yeah,
totally fine, but you never build around them because guaranteeing you get a kill, you often want to be using dice to do that. So then
yeah,
you wouldn't have dice left over. So you can get just like maximum punished off the board for doing something like Blood or Blood for the Blood God is one of those, but they both have that AoE triple for
yeah,
something where you can just get blown out if you are counting on getting that kill and holding up a triple to do it
yep,
to get this buff after your kill, and then you just don't even get it, you whiff,
yeah,
and it's like if you had just turned that triple into an onslaught, you'd at least have this
have
extra
yeah,
dice that would have taken out the thing. So
yeah,
again, I
total,
don't hate those
100%.
triples. It's a nice little bonus. They're nice when they work, but you can just never ever rely on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like I really noticed it in the Hunters of Huan Chi and the Jade Obelisk battle report. Like it was like everything was going just the way that the Hunters of Huan Chi needed it to show that they could be a viable warband. And I'm like, and I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I just, I was not, I wasn't super impressed. It was so funny because I was talking about it with one of our guys that came to work right night, and he's like, it seems like this might have been staged a little bit. And I'm, like, I don't think that they're literally like positioning the models according to a script, but like you said, they're like not playing to win, they're playing to showcase,
Right.
and that is a big difference. And I think it gives a false sense of sometimes what these war bands are about because like for example the Hunters of Huan Chi won their battle against the Jade Obelisk, and I played that literal exact mission against Slaves of Darkness and got rocked, like rocked, you know.
Uh-huh.
So, like,
Yeah.
okay, all right. But talking about the Claws of Karanak, right?
Mhm.
Um, they have, I think that their abilities kind of are somewhat interesting.
Mhm.
They, for example, so this is on the Warhammer community site that showcased the Claws of Karnak. The reaction that they have, they've got a fighter that can make like if there's a visible enemy fighter with 1 inch of them, and the enemy fighter makes a disengage action, basically until the end of the battle round, any friendly fighter that targets that one enemy fighter that made the disengage gets add one to their attacks characteristic. So um where is this good? I think it's good if like a little chaff model's holding somebody up and they have to disengage, and that chaff model can use their reaction to add one to the attacks characteristics. But I think it's very situational for that as well.
Yeah, when would you want to use it over the standard anti-dis, right? Because you
Yeah.
can normally deal some damage to someone when they disengage if you want to on a reaction
Yeah.
anyway. So you have to be sure that that +1 attack is going to result in more damage down the line than you would have
Right.
gotten from just the so to me, it's like, I'm sure there are times when that would be relevant. Like, if you know your opponent is going to disengage just to charge something else,
Yep.
sure, that's totally valid. But there's only so many things I can afford to remember in a game, at least
Right.
personally. I'm like 4 abilities. That's the
Yeah.
maximum. And
Yep.
if one of those abilities is the reaction, I can keep it in my head. I can keep it straight. But if there's 4 abilities that are more relevant than the reaction, I'm sorry.
You're a
I'm
hundred
not doing
percent
it.
correct, right? And those abilities include the standard ones that are out there, right? Like Rampage and Onslaught and Rush and all that
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
right? let alone the universal reactions, like counter and things like that. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, no, dude, you're totally correct in this. And the only time I can think that you would want this is if you have like a high wound model, maybe that needs to be shanked badly, and you know that you're going to take all of your dudes and kill that thing. So
Sure.
like maybe it's an assassination mission,
Mhm.
and that assassinate guy needs to die, right?
Yep.
So yeah, maybe, but again, um, just because something gets +1 attacks doesn't mean that that's going to translate into damage either,
Yeah,
right?
you're gonna need multiple attack activations so that it's
Yeah,
really like +3 attacks because
right.
you've got 2 different models getting in there or something like that. Mhm.
Yeah, and if something's disengaging, it's likely not charging into something else, because then what it would why would it charge into something unless for some reason it has to, which again is very situational, right?
Right,
Like,
it's 3 and they're probably, like, winning the game by doing that, right? Like, I've
yeah,
seen someone disengage and then rampage, and then they
yep,
get 2 attacks
yep,
and and but, like, you wouldn't do that unless it's gonna basically win you the game, right?
yeah, totally,
So,
totally,
I don't know when this is really gonna work.
yeah,
Yeah. I
um,
do like some of their regular abilities, though. I
yep,
think I was just talking about how you can get really screwed over on Blood for the Blood God because of you leave up dice for it and then you don't get the kill and it's like this
mm,
huge disaster for you.
yep,
But now they've got that ability where you get inspiring presence, but it's a double instead of a triple.
yep,
And that's not so bad because then it's like you left your dice up for Blood for the Blood God. It didn't work. It's very sad for you, but you've
yeah,
got this consolation prize, and then you bring in your buddy, and then your buddy finishes them off. And then maybe your buddy does Blood for the Blood God at that point. Who knows, right? But
yeah.
you can kind of get these little anyway, this sort of consolation prize for going for Blood for the Blood God and not getting it. And that's kind of nice.
Yeah, so they've got that. What you're talking about is the pack hunters, right? Which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that
that's the one.
a visible friendly fighter within 6 inches of this fighter that has the claws of Karnak and agile rune marks that hasn't yet activated can activate immediately, right? And
Mhm.
so, what's kind of interesting is a lot of them have the agile rune mark on them. It's not
Yeah,
just
all the cheap ones, all the blood whelps, and then
yep,
also the guy on all fours, the Hound of Wrath.
who's a
He's
beast.
so funny. If I
Yeah.
was gonna get 2 of this warband, it would just to be like to paint 2 of this one guy. I mean, I just think he's the funniest model that they've put out for just Warcry. If there's another one, I can't think of it. I mean, he's just so endearing.
What I love is I'm like, how far does this guy take this all the time? Does he go back to camp and keep rooting around on all fours?
Oh my
You
god,
know?
I hope so, right?
you know? And they're just like, oh yeah, he's a dog now. Like we're just gonna keep
Yep,
treating him as a dog, And like,
yep,
do they pet him and be like, who's a good boy? You know?
yep, yep.
Yeah. So I mean, but he's a beast though. He's got 5 attacks, strength 4, 2/4 damage. Like
Mhm.
he's pretty good. He did really good in the battle report. Like and he had some abilities like that. I think he had a area of effect ability that blenderized some guys around him. So he was pretty legit.
Oh, yes, he has that. Mhm. He can take out some chaff models. Yeah,
Yeah.
that part's pretty good. I think
Yeah.
it's like on a 4 up,
Hmm.
you deal 3, but it's everything within 1 inch.
Yeah.
And he has that long base, so you can kind of Tokyo drift him into a pile of enemies.
Totally.
So that's actually pretty useful. I was comparing him to, there's a Skaven that has exactly the same profile, but 1
Oh,
more
interesting.
strength.
Okay.
And so I was kind of thinking about, like, obviously the Skaven, if with no abilities, the Skaven model is much, much better, and that's the Doomflayer.
Yeah.
Um, but do the abilities on this guy because he's got pack hunters, he's got his
Yep.
AOE blender thing. Does that make up for the having 1 less strength? And I think it certainly makes it a or a conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
I agree.
cool.
Um, what's interesting about the pack hunters, right, is it doesn't require a leader to activate that, right?
Right.
It's basically anybody who has the agility rune mark can activate it, and like you said, most of the models end up having the agility rune mark. And so let's say you had like 3 or 4 doubles, you can daisy chain like 4 dudes
Yeah.
like all at once, like boom, 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 and like really let them go to town.
I'm
If
really
you've got that.
interested to see how good that is.
Hmm.
Because I honestly, I do think that that warband is pointed as if that ability is amazing. I think
Right.
generally a lot of their fighters are just a little bit weaker than
They
similar
are.
things you can get elsewhere. But I mean, Inspiring Presence, I so rarely use it because I tend to play warbands that have some of the best triples in the game. Now we'll get to the
Right.
FAQ and how that is maybe changing, but Inspiring Presence tends not to be what I am interested in when I have triples. But it's man, doubles are so much easier to come by than triples are. So
They are. So this could be really good. The problem is remember you have to have a friendly fighter that's within 6 inches, right?
should have been 8.
So
What are they doing?
yeah,
Gotta
no,
be
right?
8.
It has to be 8. It has to be 8. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, how about
um
these True Blades? How about these sort of vampire monks? I think beyond their mechanics, first of all, I think their lore is so cool where
their lore is cool.
they're the first good guys in death, right? Because they're like, oh, we have the vampire curse, but through the power of Buddhist discipline, we are managing to not ever eat people, and we
Yeah.
only eat like savage beasts that are roaming the countryside. Yeah, I just think that that's really cool lore.
Yeah, so I mean, and again, you've got vampires versus like, doggos. So the question is like Team Jacob or Team Edward, right?
Of course.
Like, like which which one are you on? So um, I think I'll be honest with you. My first thought, my very first impression, and it's sort of evolved, but my very first impression is like, oh my gosh, do we need another Soulblight Gravelord warband? Like,
'Cause so many have
seriously?
come through Underworlds. Yeah.
So many have come through Underworlds. It seems like every other Underworlds thing is a Soulblight Gravelord, right?
Yep.
And so I'm sitting here going like, oh my gosh, do we need another Soulblight Gravelord? I have since come around and said, okay, you can't use this with the Soulblight Gravelords because they're their own faction. So
Right.
that's, I think, a win, right? And B, they have a truly magnificent aesthetic, in my
Yeah.
opinion, that is different than the Soulblade Gravelords. And so I have to appreciate it for kind of what it is, right? And these guys look like, you know, either Shinto monks from, ancient Japan, or they look like Ronin samurai that are trying to like, live their lives in the way according to their, monastic code.
Yeah, yeah.
So they definitely have that Eastern kind of ancient Orient like vibe about them, and more Japanese than like a Chinese or Korean, I would say. Maybe a little bit of Korean
It's
in
like a
there,
little
right?
bit of Tibetan and a lot of Japan, which is
Right.
so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I really do like the big corded belts that they have. Like
Mm,
that just
mhm.
screams
I like
like
that too.
samurai, and kind of like a blood knot type of thing that they have, and I think that that's very cool. And I love their swords. Like their swords are just wicked looking. It's almost
I
like
like their
a
maces. Those big long
mm,
maces that they have, I think that
yeah,
those are so cool.
yeah. So they've got some really good models in this one. How do you feel about their rule set?
I like how unique they are.
Hmm.
So there's a what is it? 3 hit, 3 on a hit, 4 on a crit,
Hmm.
and pretty high strength fighter
Yep.
in that warband, and I just think that's the coolest. We've been needing to have a couple fighters like that for a long time. Their leader is, I think, 6 and then 4 on a hit, 6 on a crit, which
Yep.
is
Yep.
just so
Three.
cool. I love
Yeah.
Crit fishing, I get that it's like the thing about Warcry is that there's crazy moments and that time when you roll 3 crits on your weakest fighter, but
Right.
somehow you dealt 12 damage because 3 of your things were crits. Like people love that.
Yep.
But I like having fighters who the majority of their damage isn't through crits. I like that a
Hmm.
lot. So I love these profiles that are few attacks, but each attack does a lot of damage. Sort of as long as you don't roll a 1 or a 2, you're gonna do a lot of damage with each attack. I think that's really cool. And one of the things I also like about it is I wasn't that impressed with their abilities,
Hmm.
but their ability is Onslaught. Because
Yes.
Onslaught is better in that warband than it is in any other warband in the game. So that's really
Yes.
cool. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. I was not crazy about their abilities either. Like their quad is not
Yeah,
good. I'd rather have Rampage every
it's
day.
gotten to the point
Like
where sometimes I don't even read new quads. Like,
that's
honestly,
funny.
I
That's
yeah.
awesome. I'm with you. I'm like I read it. I'm like, meh.
Yeah,
It's not Rampage, right?
yeah, and
And
then I forget about it immediately.
yeah, I mean, I wonder if they could come up with just a better quad. I don't know, like,
Or
that
a
just does
worse
something
quad
different.
instead of Rampage,
Right.
you know? I mean,
That would yeah.
Rampage is such an important part of how I approach the game. Like, I don't play warbands that don't have at least one fighter that can rampage well, even though I
Mhm.
don't ever rely on it. I just want that bonus. I want if I get a rampage in round 3, I just automatically win the game. I love having that ability,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's the best for the game because of all of these faction quads that are just strictly worse than Rampage, or when they are better, it's like, only on Thursdays when the opponent is on their second beer but hasn't started their third, and like, yeah, it's rough.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I 100% agree with you. Um, the even so I do think that their reaction could come in handy sometimes. Where before you're like when you're targeted by a melee attack action, but before the hit rolls are made, you can add one to the fighter's toughness characteristic. That
Hmm.
could come in
It's
handy
fine.
and make a difference. I think it's fine.
Yep. Mhm. Yeah, I think
However,
sometimes on is it the aesthetic, the cheapest ones, the 90 point ones,
yeah.
you'll use it sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, however, it's the elite fighter rune mark that's on there.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yep.
Unplayable.
Yep. Right. Like, why would you do that? Like, so for example, the leader has the elite fighter rune mark.
Mhm.
I mean, he's toughness 4. I mean, I wouldn't trade up one of his attack actions for that.
Never, never. Unless I was literally carrying a treasure
Right.
and about to die, and I
Yep.
knew I was gonna die. Like, because even if there was a chance of getting out otherwise, yeah, I just can't imagine it. How about the 115 point guys? Do they have it? If
I
they can
can't
do the
tell.
reaction, even then, I don't think I'd want to. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
rough.
don't know that I would either. Right. The only
But I
time that I
still
would
like,
use it is my little tiny chaff guys, which they're not
mhm.
going to have it.
But I still like them even with all of these issues, even with all these terrible abilities that they have. Like Terrifying Howl. Okay, there are legitimately some factions where you will want to do this,
Yeah.
but it's what 1 in 5 games that you'll play
Right.
is going to be something where Terrifying Howl. That's the one where until the end of the battle round, enemy fighters within 3 inches can't use reactions.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some factions that's going to be great. Most factions, not at all, because they're gonna activate near that guy first, so that when they're actually doing things with reactions, then it's not going to be near him, right? You
Yeah.
don't actually stop your opponent from reacting by using Terrifying Howl. So Yeah, I just can't see it with their abilities. Luckily, I think that their profiles, their actual cards are so unique and so interesting that
Yeah.
I like them anyway as a faction where it's just like I use Onslaught, I use Rampage. They're the simplest faction, and that's perfect.
Yeah. So the funny thing about that terrifying howl, I actually think it comes down to the player less than the game that you're playing or the faction, because I think for the most part, a lot of people don't use reactions that often. They
Mhm.
would rather, move, they would rather swing, they would rather do that thing. I will say this, that I played, I don't know if you remember Andy from the Nova Open tournament. He won the best
Mhm.
painted models.
Yeah, I do.
So he was I played his destruction soup list the other night with my bone splitters, and boy,
Oh, I
he
didn't know
was
he was
used.
in your neck of the woods. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, he's probably about an hour. He's like 2 hours north of where I live, an hour north of where we play.
Oh, okay,
Right?
great.
So,
Perfect.
yeah. So, anyway, so he's in my neck of the woods, and we were playing together. And I'll tell you what, he made great use of reactions. Like I was taking more wounds on myself, it seemed like,
Mm-hmm.
than I was giving him sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially for like small. He had small little gits, like little netters and stuff like that. He'd be like reaction, 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 because
Yeah.
like he knew that they weren't going to do anything, and they were just there to throw nets, right?
Well, netters are
So,
the perfect thing to be reacting. And one of the
mhm,
things that I would use Terrifying Howl against is Gloomspite Gits.
yep,
Um, it's them and it's anything like OCR Bone Reapers where they've got those toughness 5 chaff guys,
yep,
or Fire Slayers who have that slightly worse version of that same Gloomspite thing, or Skaven too. It's just
yeah,
most factions don't do that. Um,
yep,
and the thing I was saying before about how it's not actually going to stop your opponents from using reactions, I was more saying like once you use this Curse Blood, first, you don't have the benefit until you use it. So you have to
right.
prioritize using it early in the
That's true.
round.
Yep,
And then once you do, they'll just they'll do their regular activations with everything around it first. And
yeah,
so if they're a reaction heavy warband, the whole rest of the battlefield they can still react and they just won't burn those activations. So
right,
that'll be what goes last. So they still might just hit you with 4 or 5 reactions in that round, depending
right.
on, the
He's
situation.
he's a 6-inch bubble essentially on a on a 22 by 30 board,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, okay, cool, fun, So, I'm gonna pick up the box. Last thing that we need to talk about. What do you think of the terrain in this one?
It's funny that we're leaving this to last because I this is the one thing that I'll probably paint first. I think it's a
Okay.
really excellent addition. First of all, actual line of sight blocking. I know that shooting isn't really something in the meta that people are super scared of right now.
Hmm.
Um, but it's still just nice to have. You never know how the game will evolve over time. And I just think like seeing more out of the bamboo is something I wanted. And so I still want to see what the bamboo looks like wild. I want to see like a bamboo thicket, right? But
Do you not have
the,
bamboo up where you live?
no, we don't.
Really?
It can't survive. No.
That's interesting. We have bamboo around here in Virginia, and it's like a totally invasive species, and
Yeah, I
people
bet.
hate it because it just won't stop like
Because it
growing.
grows forever, right? It just
Yeah,
like
it's
never
actually
stops
like
growing.
one organism with several shoots. So if like you
Yeah, yeah.
chop down half of it, like
Like a
it'll still
tuft of
keep growing.
grass. Isn't it just big grass? Isn't that what bamboo
Basically,
is?
yeah, big
Yeah.
hard grass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
but I just mean I want to see it in Warcry in the game. Anyway, I think that
yeah,
the bamboo castles are cool, but yeah.
I do too. I actually like this terrain much better than the most recent box that was in
Hmm.
the Heart of Stone. Is that what it was? Heart of Stone box?
Sundered Fate,
Sundered Fate. Sorry.
Heart of Gur,
Mm,
but with stone people.
there you go. Yeah, Sundered Fate. I think Sundered Fate was maybe my least favorite terrain for
Yep.
this kind of aesthetic that we have. And I think this one's better. I do kind of like the boxier feel of it. I feel like this is kind of like if I were to make a bamboo dwelling, like this is probably more of what I would go with,
Yeah.
like enclosures and ladders and things like that, rather than
Yeah.
just rope bridges and climbing up things, right? So, um, yeah, you only get two trees in this one, right? But I think it more than makes up for it with the I guess the bamboo fort. So,
Mhm.
I also like kind of the blocking line of sight. I think those add interesting things in the game because if you're not paying attention, you can hide dudes in strategic places.
Yeah.
When you've got line of sight blocking, when everything's open, it's hard to like find hiding places for guys. And I feel like in a skirmish game, hiding places are like probably what some of your little cowardly dudes would do. You know, I
Absolutely. As they
so
should.
yeah, as they should. So I think having like less visual is interesting, like less like you said, less line of sight. So I still think that this is again like half of a normal terrain box and they're asking us to pay for a full one,
Yeah.
and that does kind of get my goat a little bit. Like I think Games Workshop's getting a little greedy with some of this stuff, in terms of like expecting us to like continue to buy a half a box worth of terrain of what used to be a full box for the same price,
Yeah.
so what we're seeing here is total shrinkflation,
It
where
is.
you're paying more for less rather than paying more for the same amount, right?
Mhm.
So you're paying the same amount for less rather
Right.
than more for less. Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I'm talking
I
about.
know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
Shrinkflation. Anyway, so again, I think between the three boxes, you can have two full tables now, which I think is good. But
Mhm.
you're definitely like I wouldn't if I went to a tournament and I put the Sundered Fate or the Blood Hunt on the table. I think people would say like this seems like a pretty sparse table.
Yeah, I include a set of Sylvaneth Woods when
Yep,
I put my Sundered Fate on the table, because otherwise it's just not enough stuff.
yep, I agree, 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think you have to. So,
Mhm.
I'll probably end up picking this up. I'm likely gonna wait until it hits Amazon just because I've got a gift card that I'll probably use to pick it up. But
Mm, nice.
um, I'm also kind of a collector when it comes to this type of stuff. Like I'm all about collecting things. These are
Yeah,
my these are
absolutely.
my precious moments dolls.
And one
So
cool
yeah,
thing about getting these boxes fast and thick, you can make this sort of more sober decisions, right? Because the Sundered Fate box is still around. So if
yeah,
you see this and decide, hey, I actually prefer the old one, you can get that instead, or you can, jump on this because you see that the terrain here is better than it was in Sundered Fate, and this is
hmm
probably a better place to start than Sundered Fate was. um, all sorts of stuff like that. And it also means that they are throwing FAQs at us multiple times a year
yes,
instead of
yep.
just once a year, which is wonderful. And the last FAQ was pretty darn exciting, wasn't it?
It was, and that kind of brings us to our main topic of the show. You know what, Dan? I totally had all of the Jade Obelisk guys. Like, we didn't even really talk about Jade. Well, actually, we need to talk about Jade Obelisk a little bit.
You wanna put this one on hold and go to Jade Obelisk? Let's do it.
Let's talk about them real quick. I don't,
Yeah.
because to be honest with you, like, I'm not crazy about them. Let me put it this way.
Really? Okay.
I
What is it
think I
about them you don't like?
well, I think they're perfectly average.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I think that they're like the Hunters of Huan Chi are like F tier in my opinion, and I think
Uh-huh.
that there's other ones that are like, better. For a bespoke warband, I actually think that they're probably B plus, A minus tier.
Mhm.
For just bespoke stuff. So I think that they're decent. I think that they're average in the overall meta, though. If you're just gonna take my instant opinion, what do you think? Just straight out of the gate, hot take. Where do you think that they fall into the meta?
Um, so first of all of the 100-point fighters, they're the most damage efficient thing in the game. And
Yes.
that's pretty cool.
It is pretty good.
Anytime you're the best at something, I'm willing to take note. Now, the thing they're the best at is kind of tough, right? I mean, 12 wounds on toughness 4 for 100 points. That would be fine on a fast fighter who, or like a fighter with 2-inch or 3-inch range who can
Yeah.
put themselves in positions to be pretty safe. Um, it's a little bit nerve-wracking on a 3-inch fighter who's just not going to be able to choose where and when the fight happens. So, the semi-elite fighters are really interesting, but I think it's going to take a lot of skill to use them correctly.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that really frustrates me with this warband is the cheap fighters are only 5 points cheaper than the next ones up, which is really, really annoying from a list building
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's not a lot of variation there, right?
yeah, yeah, which is fine. The thing that I like is the obelisk bearer because so you can go like slow glass cannon, which I don't know if that play style is viable.
Uh-huh.
Or you can just go these 95-point people who are just medium at everything. I don't
Yeah.
think that that's very interesting. The archers are just stone unplayable, the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But this Jade Obelisk guy, 110 points, but for that price, you're getting 20 wounds,
Mhm.
which is a lot,
Yeah.
and then a 4-4-2-4 profile, which normally, isn't the most exciting thing, except getting it for 110 points is actually pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
So he's really interesting. I wish he had the rune mark as well as the Nephirite priestess
Yeah.
because um, the lack of anything cheap. He's the kind of fighter I'd want to put into a warband that can get cheap fighters onto the board.
Mm.
The Nephirite priestess also has 20 wounds for that 105 point profile.
Yep.
So you don't have to be all made of glass if you don't want to be. It's so funny looking at the cards that you've got up here. It's like these two are 20 wounds, and then for the same price, you can have this Idolarch for only 8.
For only
The
8 wounds, right? Yeah.
for the first thing I think I would do with this warband, and I've got them. They're on my list of things to paint up eventually,
Yeah.
and I'll try them once I do. But the first thing I would do is I would cut the Idolarch, and I would cut a couple of the 95-point guys,
Uh-huh.
and I just bring in something fast because the
Yeah.
Idolarch is not doing it for me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would cut one of these 95 pointers, and then that gives you 200 points to spend on something quick.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and especially if you can find something that may help you with movement, right? Because that is definitely the biggest weakness of this warband. Look, having a 100-point fighter that can go 4 attacks, strength 5, 2-5 damage, like that's a very cheap Stormcast Eternal.
Yeah. Mhm.
And yes, it's toughness 4. Yes, it's only 12 wounds, so that could go down pretty quick, but the 3-inch movement is what is just so tough for me there, right? Like, yeah, again, a Stormcast Eternal is only 3-inch movement, but they also have like 25 wounds or something like that. So,
20
you
wounds
know,
on like toughness 6,
yeah,
something like
exactly.
that for 30 more points.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I would rather go the 95-point guy. I think your statement where he's he's medium at everything, which
Mhm.
just makes it mediocre, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just okay. I mean, why would you go with a 95 point and for 5 more points? You can up your damage profile significantly. You can up your tough or strength profile significantly, and you also have more wounds, right?
Mhm.
I guess because the 95 point, double hammer guy has an extra point of movement, and yeah, like I mean,
Yeah.
I guess, So like I don't know why I would go with a 95-point guy. And again, the bow guy is not worth it whatsoever. I will say this, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we get into their abilities, but I really dislike the ability. Well, I really like some of the abilities, but I dislike some of them vehemently. Um,
The ones
because
where they revolve around the priest and the
yes,
obelisk. Yeah.
Yes. I hate those so much, right? Because what it means is that you have to have these two kind of hanging out sort of in the same vicinity, and you don't want to put them in separate battle groups because you might be coming on two different board edges
Right.
with that, you know? And so like you need to put them in the same battle group, but that's kind of putting eggs in too many eggs in one basket maybe depending on what your build is. And
Mhm.
I just and but then again, if you put those two in one group, then your other guys are going to be in a different group, which means that they can't take advantage of that healing property anyway because they're on the other side of the board. You know, so you're
Yep.
like, it's such a catch 22 that I don't like the way that they design the abilities affects the way that you can play this warband, I think, effectively. And
And it forces you
so
to get a second box, I think. Like, you
yeah,
just have to have 2 obelisk bearers to really
yeah,
make it work. Mhm.
I agree. So looking at I've got their abilities right here. The stone warp. Look, it's not a terrible it's not a terrible ability in that anybody can use it, right?
Mhm.
You do have to be within 9 inches of an obelisk, or sorry, an icon bearer. And then
Yep.
if you're also within 6 inches of the priest, then you get like full health of the ability. Otherwise, you get half rounded up. This is
But none of them
fantastic
have
for.
any health anyway.
I know, right? Exactly, exactly. That's the only way you're going to keep him alive, though. Maybe. But this only works well in a game like Ley Lines or Hidden Treasures or something like that, where the objective markers are disappearing from the board and you're going to end up converging on one.
Mm,
Like
sure.
so all your models are going to get into kind of like the same bubble. Then maybe it works. But if you're working on any kind of like assassinate mission or hunter killer mission or something like that, I just don't, or treasure mission, like I just don't see it happening.
Yeah,
Like I just
same.
it doesn't happen. So so that's with that one. And again, the quad, right, which is the might of
Don't
the
read
speaker.
quads. Don't get mad about
It's
quads. We can just
it's
tell the
just
people the
awful.
quad is useless.
It's
Never
so
read
bad.
quads. This is my new
Yeah.
policy. My late New Year's resolution for 2023 is not to read quads.
Yeah. So
Um,
I mean,
so let's talk about some of the
yeah.
ones that don't rely on the obelisk bearer.
So
Maybe those will make you a little less mad. What do you think about rock shattering blow?
okay,
This is the
so
one on the 100-point
yeah.
guys. Yeah.
Yes. So I think this is a very good one. Add one to the strength. So they're already starting out at strength 5,
Yep.
right? So this bumps them up to strength 6, which puts them in very competitive mode of taking out some Stormcast Eternals, taking out a Gut Lord,
Mhm.
taking
Taking out
out,
Iron
so
Jaws. Yeah.
Iron Jaws. Like I think that they can be competitive against these really high toughness fighters that are out there with just a
Yep.
simple double. That's not very hard, and you get to add damage points to each hit and critical hit. So
Yep.
all of a sudden, like instead of just doing 3-5, right, that they were hitting on before, they're
I mean,
doing 4-6
it makes me
or
more interested in the one that has 4-5-2-5 because you
mm-hmm,
get the extra attack, more hits to get buffed off of, and now
yep,
all of a sudden you're throwing 4-6-3-6.
yeah,
I mean, that's just absurd, right?
yeah.
Um, so if I were playing Iron Jaws, like you said, Iron Jaws Stormcast, I'd be terrified of Jade Obelisk. And I think it's
So
cool to have kind of a rock, paper, scissors situation in the meta.
yeah, the Savage Big Boss, by the way, he's 185 points. He has 3 attacks, strength 6, 3-6, or strength 5, 3-6. So
Okay.
look at this. This is 100 points with the double. You're bringing him up to, if not beyond, the ability of the Savage Big Boss, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's good. The hammering strikes, I think, is kind of situational. Like
Yeah.
those little guys have to be hit first and then they can do it. But I think we agreed that those little guys probably aren't worth it. Take the 100-point guys
Right.
and just don't
Only
even worry
5 more
about this one.
points, and then get your
Yeah.
speed somewhere else. Because those 4 inches of move over 3 inches, that's not changing your life, really.
No.
Uh,
No.
so so get rid of them and bring in an ally that is quick. I definitely
Yeah.
think these guys have to have at least one quick fighter, and I'm not sure if the Idol Arc is it. Uh, let's look at this
Especially
triple. So
yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Pick a visible enemy fighter within 9 inches of this fighter. Subtract half the value of this ability from either the move or the toughness of that fighter to a minimum of 1 until the end of the battle round. I do think this is pretty cool. If this was on a fighter that was good on its own
Hmm.
or just playable
Hmm.
on its own, I'd be pretty excited about it.
What's interesting is you throw this on a gut lord, right? Who has a movement of 3, but can double move and then has like a bonus, can use a double to basically give a bonus move
Oh,
and
you're
then
talking
attack,
about
right?
mega bosses right now, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You throw this on a
yeah,
mega boss, not
yeah.
well, because then their bonus move is also only 1.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm saying. So Mega Boss, Gut Lord, some Tyrant, for example, right? That can use a bonus to
Well, the
move. Like,
ogres give themselves +3 to move,
oh,
and
that's true.
that's
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah. You
double.
got a good point. That's a good point.
Um, so that's a little tough, but if you make an ogre go from 4 to then I mean, if you really spike this and go 4 to 1 inches of move, and
Uh
then
huh.
+3 is just back to 4, and then they have to waste this double to get, that could potentially be important in a game.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but still,
Um,
like an orc, a Mega Boss, or something like that, where all of a sudden they have to use a double move to just move regular. Like that's pretty big. You've basically taken away an activation from them.
yeah.
You
And the
know.
same is true of robbing them of their toughness, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, I mean, if you're getting a bunch of the 100-point guys, it's not that important because they have strength 5 anyway. But if
Yeah.
you're spamming a bunch of obelisk bearers, right, and they only have strength 4, then
Yeah.
Gaze of the Idolarch, all of a sudden, that obelisk bearer really blenders toughness 3 things.
Yeah.
So if you can get them down to toughness 3, that's pretty good. So,
But yeah, but let's say you have an annihilator that's toughness 6,
mhm,
right? And you spam him down to toughness 4, all of a sudden your 100-point boys don't have to use their double hammering strikes to push up over anymore. Like they
right.
already over hitting on a 3 up, right? So,
Yeah, if you know at least 2 people are going to fight them, then
yeah.
absolutely worth it because then, it's saving you 2 doubles there, which is
Yeah.
really nice. So let's kind of flip back to the idol arc
Yep,
itself,
yep,
though.
yep.
Does this triple ability make you think about this profile in a better light?
Um Look, he's 105 points because he has 8 inch of fly movement, right? Like that's
Yeah.
why he's 105 points. 3 attacks, strength 3, 1/3 damage is not gonna do diddly in this game. And he's toughness 3 with 8 wounds. I mean, something with a stiff breeze will blow this guy over, you
Yep.
know. So you really have to use him almost strategically. Maybe he can cap some objectives for you. Maybe he can, while he's doing that, he's staring something down to kind of make it easier. But you won't be able to put him in the action very much. And
Hmm.
with the new FAQ, he's not going to be the greatest treasure carrier. Um,
Right.
you know, so and
Hmm.
we can talk about that a little bit, but he basically takes away his fly ability. So yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, would I put him in there? Maybe. I don't know. I think it depends on my meta because if I knew I had a lot of high toughness, then maybe I would for the ability.
So someone did show up to my tournament, the tournament I ran last month. 2 people were playing Jade Obelisk. I was so
Oh,
impressed at how
wow.
quickly people had painted this
That's
warband.
awesome.
And aesthetically, like I've said, this is one of the 3 favorite warbands
Yeah.
aesthetically that they've ever put out for me. So like I will be painting them eventually. So maybe other people were also excited, but one person was straight out of the box and they actually went 2 and 2. So I do think there's something to just the huge damage output
Mhm.
from those other guys. But another person did try playing 2 idol arcs and really leaning on that speed and leaning on that triple ability. And it seemed um, he went he did win a game. So he went 1 and 3,
Mm.
but I think part of that is like he's very experienced and very good. I don't think the average player would be able to win any games
Ah,
with two Idolarchs.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm very skeptical of it. I should ask him. I'll need to ask him after this podcast
yeah.
because he's one of the Dogs of Warcry folks. They
Oh,
came to,
interesting.
yeah, and that whole play group uh, won a lot of games at my tournament. It's a good reminder that the folks who play a lot are good.
Yeah,
Surprise, surprise, right?
yeah, yeah,
Even if they don't play competitively, just getting a lot of reps in, even if they're narrative reps, even if they're like not trying very hard reps, it just gets you comfortable with the game and it gets it so that you're going to beat people who are trying to be competitive but who don't really play very
yep,
much.
yep.
Anyway, so yeah, I'm pretty skeptical about idle arcs, but I'll have to ask around about them. I'm interested if maybe other people are having better luck. Also, 8 wounds on 3 toughness is
Ah,
just such a problem,
I mean,
especially in a warband that doesn't have chaff to like protect it with. I don't know.
you know what's wild is like bow guys, like the bliss barbs could take this guy down.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, and that's scary because you don't want it going too far
right.
on its own. And
Or like
yeah, I don't
you
know.
can't cap objectives with this guy if all of a sudden, like let's say you're playing against Lumineth Realm Lords and they've just got wardens with 3-inch reach, and now you
Yeah,
literally can't stand on an objective without a warden being able to hit you, and they're only
yep,
65 points, and now you just get blendered immediately by a warden, and
yep,
you've not only have you died, but you've died to something 40 points cheaper than you, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's
right,
just a
exactly.
disaster.
Yep,
So I
yeah.
that ability does look good, but I don't know if the idol arc is good enough to support it.
I think it
Um,
depends on your meta, like I was saying, right? Like if you've got a
yeah,
like a high toughness meta, I think throwing him in there to do like that one job isn't a bad idea. It's not
sure.
terrible,
Hmm.
but if you've got a meta where you're playing against a lot of like toughness 3, toughness 4 war bands,
Hmm.
you got like a lot of He Knights of Slanesh, you got like a lot of uh uh Daughters of Cain or something like that,
Yeah.
or a lot of the regular war bands that are out there that are usually toughness 3, 4. I would go with more of the big damage boys, you
Yeah.
know. So
I'd be pretty
uh,
concerned about running this warband into something like Slanesh in general,
yeah.
just because they can both outmaneuver you and put enough damage out that they punish you for being glass cannons,
Yep.
right? Whereas,
Yep.
and they also have more bodies than you, so they can kind of dance around your activations a little bit, come after the
Mhm.
people who have already activated, stuff like that. Um, the place where I think that these are amazing are obviously into all these really tough elite war bands. I think all of the super elite war
Yeah.
bands should be really scared of Jade Obelisk in general.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Because, 12 wounds on your kind of better fighters is not a lot. I mean,
Right.
that won't survive maybe even one activation depending on how things go. It depends, you know.
Depending on, yeah, what you're looking at. Like the
Yep.
mega boss will be able to take them down in one shot, stuff like
Yeah.
that, but your average fighters won't. And so I think it'll be one of those situations where like the Jade Obelisk, maybe your biggest, most memorable fighter is going to be blowing them off the board, but then the rest of their guys are just going to be really beating up your middle of the road guys. Um,
Right.
should be interesting. I don't know. I do
Yeah.
think they're not terrible just because when you're the best at something, that's,
That's
it's
something.
not going to be a disaster. That's something, right?
Yeah.
But um, but I
Th
think
yeah,
there's a
and
lot of work to do if you want to make them really good.
this is why I said I think straight out of the box, I think they're an average warband,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
So that's kind of where I'm at. Aesthetic wise, lore wise, A plus, man. A plus for the
yeah,
aesthetic.
incredible.
And they're amazing. So yeah, very good. All right. Well, thank you for the breakdown on the Jade Obelisk, my friend. let's get to the FAQ, which is kind of like the main topic that we want to talk about today. I've got it here that I can share so that we can kind of go through and make sure that we're not skipping anything really important.
Sure.
Oop, that's not the one I wanted to share. Okay, hold on. Technical difficulties, folks.
Well, let's
Technical
start
difficulties.
here. I'll bring up
Yeah,
one
go
that
ahead.
you just mentioned. While you're bringing that up, you talked about the Idalark, kind of flying
Mm-hmm.
being a little bit more punished with treasures now than it was before. So one of the big changes is that they changed the way treasures work so that if you pick a treasure up mid-move, if you've moved, up to 2, basically it reduces 2 from your movement immediately when you pick it
Mm-hmm.
up, whereas it used to be in the first version of 2.0 that it would only do that if you started a move action while holding a treasure.
Right.
So you could often do something which felt really, really unfair, which was run up right next to the treasure
Yep.
and wait, then start your next action and start your move 1/100th of an inch, pick up the treasure through that, and then keep going at your maximum move speed.
Right. Right.
And that was just like a really dirty exploit that was just
Yeah.
horrible to play against.
Was
So
so I never thought about that until I read it, and I'm like, "Oh, that's dirty," you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I did it to Jason at Nova actually, but
Oh, nice. Well
yeah,
done.
yeah, with my Mizzen Master. Yeah, it feels really, really icky. Um, and so I'm really glad that they closed that loophole. That's wonderful. That's just like a purely good change. Nothing to complain about.
Yeah, and it still has the same things, right? You can't fly
Mhm.
for the remainder of that move action as well, right? And basically it says if the fighters moved further than the modified move characteristic before they picked it up, that move action ends. So it's like, no, we're serious about this. Right. um, I think the only thing that they missed out on here, and I don't know, you can tell me if you think this is a feature or a bug. I think it's a bug. They should make it so you can't teleport with treasure as well.
Yeah. There's only
um,
one model in the game, right, where it's like a real problem,
There, yeah,
isn't
but
it?
you could
There's
also do
there's
it with the
two.
Dreadblade Harrow.
Oh, you can. Yes,
Yep.
that's true.
So Dreadblade Hero and the Tree Revenant
Right.
Scion
Hmm.
are the ones that are like the big ones that you can do, right? So, um, and I saw a game get won by that, and the guy looked at me and he's like, "This feels like he's cheating here," and I looked at it and I'm like, "He's not. I know it feels that way, but rules is
Yeah.
written like this is totally legal." So
And
I,
we're
I
not seeing Sylvaneth just like run rampant through the meta. Maybe
right.
that's because there's not that many treasure missions. I don't know. Um, but I agree that it's not. It doesn't feel great when it happens.
Yeah.
And we are seeing some people ally in tree revenants into their
Yep.
war bands. So yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you. Although, man, if you can't teleport with a treasure, then all of a sudden Sylvaneth needs to get some buffs because
Some serious buffs.
that's one of like I would say that's the only thing they do that feels. I mean, I guess they have a netter, which is good,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
they're pretty. If it weren't for their two really game warping abilities, they would just be really, really bad. So I would like to see if that happens.
Yeah.
Sylvaneth gets some other love elsewhere, but who knows?
Absolutely. Well, let me move up to the top of the document, and maybe we can just kind of work down. And if there's ones
Sure.
that I think that are interesting, then maybe we can talk about this. So the first one that I see here is from the core rulebook: attack actions. This is a big one right here that they
Mm,
needed clarification on, and I felt like the spirit of it was sort of there, but the rules as written, you could not legally put it in, and that is um, A missile action cannot target an enemy fighter that is within 1 inch of another fighter from the attacking fighter's warband unless both of the following are true. Okay. And so this is that it was missing that last part right there. Okay.
Hmm.
So both of these things have to be true for you to not be able to target an enemy fighter. One, that attack action has no minimum range. And three, the attacker is within 3 inches of the enemy fighter.
Yep.
Right. So what we saw is like there was like, for example, the javelin on some of the Stormcast models that was
Hmm.
like an 8-inch spear throw, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of war bands have the like
That
8-inch
javelin
range.
profile is actually pretty common. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So you've got that javelin that's like 8 inches, and it had no minimum range, and so you could use it as a melee weapon. But if you had a fighter that was there with you, even if you were in melee, they wouldn't let you use it, right?
Right.
So,
So you could get
um,
completely stuck not being able to do anything sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was kinda like, "Oh, I can't do anything here," which didn't make sense, right? Because it's a javelin, you should be able to still use it as a spear,
Yep.
right? And so basically it's saying, look, as long as even yes, we know that it has a 0 to 8-inch range. As long as that fighter is within 3 inches, they can still use that weapon as a melee, is basically what this fact is saying.
Hmm.
So, I think that's very clear, and I think it's very good, a very good change
And it
there.
makes a lot of sense too in terms of shooting into combat, where
Right.
you don't shoot into combat because you're afraid of hitting your friends. Well, if you're within 3 inches, you know, you're accurate enough, you're not so worried about hitting your friend anymore. So
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense.
Yep, yep. So that was a welcome change because I think we all intellectually knew that that's what they sort of meant, I think,
Hmm.
by it, but the rules as they were written didn't allow us to play it that way
Yep.
because it was just not that clear. So, all right. The other thing is this big one. This is a really big one. It's the raised fighters.
Yep.
Okay. So, what is interesting about this fact, in my opinion, is that they have gotten to the point where they recognize that there's resurrection abilities, especially on death, that you can bring models back. um to the point, it is happening so much that they're calling them a separate name. They're calling them raised fighters. They're not like fighters that have been returned or
Yep.
resurrected fighters. They're calling them raised fighters, and they're describing when you have a raised fire, what does that mean, right? So Soulblight Gravelords can do it. Night Haunt can do it. I don't think that Caradron, or not Caradron, sorry, um the ghoul guys, the
Feck
flesh eater
can't do it.
courts.
No, they don't
Feck
do it.
can't do it, but the
Things like Tarantulas Brood do it. It's
yep,
scattered
okay.
throughout the game. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, following rules apply to the raised fighters. Raised fighters cannot be activated, use abilities, or make reactions in the combat phase in which they're set up. Huge change there, right?
Yep.
Huge change because it used to be that as long as they hadn't activated before, they could come on and activate again, which
And
could
you could
be a
do it for something that had died in the previous round. So you had
yeah.
this whole smorgasbord of this toolbox that you could
Yep.
raise at any time, go into any combat, and you could just raise something to then go kill something really, really easily. And it
Yep.
just exponentially increased the killing power of a lot of these lists because it was it turned resurrection not only into an activation advantage
Hmm.
situation or a attrition situation, but also into a burn spell because
Yeah.
you would take something that had died in a completely separate part of the board and just throw it forward,
Yeah.
often with
Slingshot it
pretty
essentially.
fast models because you could do it. You can still do this part, but you could do it with like flyers who would fly across the board,
Hmm.
charge, attack, then resurrect something to then continue the attacks. Yeah, it was very, very busted.
Yeah, especially like, you send your guy into an area where all the activations had been used up,
Mhm.
summon a grave guard, and he just goes to town.
Right, because they can't activate to respond anymore. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So that's a huge thing. They can't even do anything that turn that they're set up. I think that's a really good move. Race fighters cannot use heroic traits or artifacts, and cannot spend or gain levels of renown. Okay, that's for like the narrative stuff. Race fighters are not affected by any abilities that affected them when they were taken down. So if they got like a +3 to attack or something like that, and they
Mhm.
died before they were able to take advantage of it, they don't get to use that when they come back.
Mhm.
Um, Mostly because they can't again activate in that round, right?
Yep.
While they're on the battlefield, race fighters are not considered to have been taken down. So that is interesting in some of the victory conditions, right?
Yep.
And after a battle, race fighters are considered to have been taken down in that battle. So that, well, I just kind of misspoke there. I guess for victory conditions, that fighter is considered to have been taken down after the battle of that. But there are some missions where you count the numbers of fighters that were taken down in that round.
Yep.
And
So for Reaper, they actually
yeah,
weirdly didn't make it that much clearer, right? I think you'd have
right.
to, I could very much see someone reading this once and not understanding how it works in Reaper.
Yeah.
Um, but right now, it does stop you from scoring point. It does stop your opponent from scoring points in Reaper because while they're on the battlefield, they're not taken down. And
Mhm.
then after the battle, they are taken down. But
Yeah.
Reaper has already checked to see if you get the points, and so you don't get the points. Um,
So
so
one of the things, yeah, yeah, 100%. One of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about in relation to that is the fact that they did change the summon undead minions with the Soulblight Gravelords. And I think that this was another nerf to the Soulblight Graveguard list that was out there, right? They had like ton of Graveguard. They would summon them, they'd come on the board again and just fight, fight, fight.
and be
The
full
big
health.
fat
Mhm.
full health. And the reason why is because they had the minion rune mark on them. And basically it said if you summon a fighter that has been taken down, has a minion rune mark, they come back full health, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can never get rid of these guys, right?
Right.
So basically it says here that if you summon, so this is the Soulblight Gravelords hero ability, summon undead minions. If you summon a minion, the or a model that has a minion rune mark, you set it up wholly within 3 inches of the fighter, and it comes back with full health. If you summon a fighter that has an elite rune mark, you only remove the number of damage points allocated equal to the value of the ability. So now instead of coming back at full health, the max that Graveguard will come back with is full 6 health left
Right.
max instead of 10.
Which is much more reasonable. I do
Yeah.
think Soulblight Gravelords are still one of the stronger
Yes.
factions in the
Yeah.
game, just
Yeah.
because, Graveguard are still ridiculously points
They're still
efficient.
really good.
Skeletons are
Yeah.
still ridiculously good, but it's going to make them feel a little bit less unfair to play against, just
Hmm.
because the tricks are not as absurd. Before, they had both the most powerful fighters in the game and the best ability in the game,
Yeah.
and now, only one of those is true. So that's great.
Yeah.
Um,
And so they added the elite remark to Seneschal, Skeleton Champion with Mace, Skeleton Champion with Halberd, Graveguard, like all different kinds of the Graveguards. And so what you see is basically the zombies and skeletons, not the champions, basically retain the minion remark. So they can come back full health with that. Um, yeah. Okay. So going through that, that was pretty good right there. We talked about the treasure. Here's a big one right here. Dan, you want to read that one for us?
I cannot read it on this tiny screen.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
gonna need
Sorry.
you to
That's okay. I'll
get me.
do it. I'll do it. I'll do it.
All right, now I
Can
can read it.
All right. Can I
Can I
use
use
blade? Yeah, go
Bladeborn
ahead. Go ahead.
fighters from the Tome of Champions or White Dwarf in Warcry? Yes. Use the rules found on page 91 of White Dwarf 482, which are not clear at all, and don't use those rules. Just know that it would not have counted unless they were saying yes here, which is
Right.
great. So
Yeah.
all of the Bladeborn profiles that we've ever gotten are totally valid. The fact that they call out the Tome of Champions here is great. Now,
That was the big part.
there's
Yeah.
there's a little bit of fun kind of exploiting to do with kind of a lot of the Bladeborn fighters are on the old 1.0 points algorithm, so
Hmm.
you can get fast fighters now for cheap where you couldn't before, which
Oh,
is
that's a
kind
good
of
point.
interesting. It also means a lot of the 1.0 Bladeborn fighters are completely unplayable. Do you remember how bad Iron Jaws were in 1.0, or how
Yeah.
bad like a lot of the just really expensive tough fighters were that um, anything with high toughness was just so
Yep.
bad.
Yep.
So that's tough, but there's just I mean, how much it gave to the game in terms of the things that you could play with, the number of abilities that were out there to play with, all of the new
Yeah.
profiles. Yeah, it's wonderful to see. People had been wanting this ever since 2.0 came out.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that was like probably the biggest asked question all the time. Can I play with the Bladeborn still? Right? And the answer was like no, but we're hoping in the next FAQ.
Yep.
So that was a big one. A lot of the other ones on this page, I don't think that we're really going to go through. Like, it's just like, can you stand on a platform? What does it mean to use an ability? What does it mean to like get bonuses? I recommend that you guys all read it because I think it's very important, but it's not super worthy of like what we're going to talk to
The
about
only
today.
thing here is the
Hmm.
one where they, if you scroll up a little bit, um, well, there's a couple here where they make it really clear that critical hits and hits
Oh yeah.
language-wise, there is no
Yep.
overlap there. Anytime something describes hits but not critical hits, that's exactly what it means. It doesn't change criticals. Anytime something describes crits but not hits, it's just stuck and siloed there. It's
Yep.
also like the Bolt Boy boss gets a little buff here, because if you crit on a 4 but you only hit on a 5, well, now you still crit on 4s, so you
Yep.
do get the full damage there, which is nice.
It's
Um,
almost like an increase to your strength. Like
yeah, yeah,
oftentimes a +2 increase to your strength,
yep, yeah, it
and
adds
you're hitting
damage and
crits.
strength, which is great.
Yep. Yep. So that's great.
Yeah, so do you want to
Um,
get into the big one now?
yeah, let's talk about it, right? So the big one that happened, I think the earthquake monster shattering change were the points to the monsters that we got.
Yep.
Um, I have a feeling that after Justin Orton's win at Warhammer World, it made Games Workshop really go back to the drawing board on monsters.
And then another guy won with a Chimera in Nurgle like a month later,
Hmm.
too.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. So I think that they're like, oh, okay, we really need to address this. And what a better time now than now. So let's do it. So basically, you saw across the board the cost of monsters go up significantly,
Yeah,
right?
usually around
So
100 points,
yeah,
sometimes more.
yeah, sometimes more.
I think
So
the only one that went up by less than that was the Dankhold Trogoth,
mhm,
which probably only should have gone up by like 20 points, but
yeah, yeah, right, exactly.
um, so yeah, let's break it down. So in general, like we said, they all went up around 100 points.
Hmm.
In my opinion, and I'll ask you too, I think it was a little heavy-handed in that I think some monsters really shouldn't have gone up that high. Should have really gone up like 50 points, maybe
Yeah,
75 points, but not 100. And one monster probably could have gone up even a
a little
little
bit
bit
more.
more.
I
Uh,
wonder which one that was, Dan.
so the Chimera is now 515 points. I've
Yeah.
played with it twice
Yep.
since the nerf, and it is 1-1. So I brought it to my local play group once. I won uh minor victory actually. My opponent was still able to kind of do some stuff. Pre-nerf, it would have been a major victory. They would not have cleared enough things to count as half of my warband, so that
Yeah.
does make a difference, right? Turns a major win into a minor win. The second time I played it in like a personal testing game against the list I took to Nova, and the Caradron like Thundercat daycare list actually ended up winning, so the Chimera lost. Um, so it's certainly not as overpowering as it was before, but I think it's
Yeah.
still pretty good. You said you also played with a Chimera once since the nerf, right?
Not since the nerf. It was literally the day before the nerf happened.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Literally the day before. And so, I mean, I was sitting here going, and it was so funny because it was Andy, as we're talking about. He was playing it. He's because I played. It was a um, what was it? What was his list? It was a Slaves to Darkness list. I think that he had with his Chimera,
Okay.
maybe.
Not too important what the exact list is
Yeah,
since
but
it's
anyway,
not valid
yeah,
anyway. Yeah.
yeah. But the point was is that like it was no Beast of Chaos. Sorry, he was playing Beast of Chaos, and so like I was doing well against the Beast of Chaos, but that Chimera was just wrecking me. Like I couldn't stay on an objective because it was the Dragon Mall,
Yep.
right? And all this stuff. And the whole time he's like, "I'm sorry, this should be like up in points. I'm sorry, this shouldn't really be this cheap." And sure enough, like the day later, right? Literally the day after, like it goes up in points. So, um, my
And what I've yeah.
issue. Oh yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
go
Go
on.
ahead. Sorry,
Oh,
I
I
was
was
gonna say
just gonna
my
say
issue. Sorry.
you go. You go.
My issue is that the Chimera is 515 points
Uh-huh.
and the Terrorgeist is 500 points and the Zombie Dragon is 540.
Yeah.
Like, that makes no sense to me because the Terrorgeist has a freaking dinner plate as a base that is really hard to get it into where you need it to be, depending
Yeah.
on the board. And it doesn't have the same strength and damage output on its regular attacks as the Chimera does.
Yeah,
So
Terrorgeist at 475, Zombie Dragon at 500 probably would have been pretty fair, and
yeah,
then Chimera at 540. If I could
I think
reshuffle
that's
those,
right.
I think that's where
Yeah.
I would put everything. But overall, I'm not too upset about it. What I've found is the Chimera will still wreck you, right? Because the
Yes.
profile's the same as it was before.
Yep.
But there's so much less to the opponent's warband now, other than
Mhm.
the Chimera, that as long as you have like a warband that's kind of well put together to do this, but you can just go wreck their warband and just
Right.
avoid the Chimera. And
Mhm.
before, they would have a whole 120 points worth of extra stuff to like not get wrecked with. Whereas
Yeah.
now it's like the Chimera is literally more than half of their warband. They're going to have a deployment group with only like 200 points in it,
Right.
because that Chimera, they've only got 485 points to play with, right? One of their
Yep.
deployment groups is going to be a respectable normal deployment group, but probably one of them is going to be really tiny and have like nothing good in it. So you
Yep.
can just like blow one of their deployment groups completely off the board. Um, and kind of really bully the rest of their warband around that way, and and you can get some wins there. I do think good lists with chimeras are still going to be pretty good, but I don't think they're necessarily like the game breaking cutting edge of the format the way they were.
100%. And that was the issue that I ran into. He had optimized that Chimera list with the Beast of Chaos, and so he had a lot of cheap chaff models that I had to chew through.
Hmm.
And just by the time I got done killing most of them, like the Chimera was there to clean up, right?
Yep.
So
Whereas
with
the
that
other did
same.
two less.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So, I mean, now he'd only have 4 models in a Camaro probably, maybe 5.
Yeah, that's a totally
So,
different proposition to chew through those. Hmm.
yeah, yeah, especially, like, with a Gore Grunt that could kill 2 of them in a
Hmm.
turn with a Rampage, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
in one battle group. So, it's very different. My opinion, I think that it was well done. I think that as you mentioned, um some of them went up higher than they should. And Andy said, "Oh, like the Dankhold Trogoth is paying for the sins of my Chimera." And I said, "They're all paying for the sins of the Dragon Maul. That's what they're all paying for right
Yeah, yeah.
now." Because that ability is just too good. I think there's a combination of stuff there, right?
Hmm.
One, um, the first thing is that you can pull from like 6 inches away, which is pretty far.
Yep.
Um, oh my gosh, my dog is freaking out on me. Hold on. Finn.
Mhm.
You can pull from 6 inches away, which is pretty far, but then you get to set them up clear on the other side of your base,
Yeah.
right? So it's like a 10-inch like difference
And it does
of
too
like
much
movement.
damage. Doing 3
Yeah,
for every 4 up is
yeah,
absurd. Um,
exactly.
it's yeah, there's just it does too much. If it did 1 damage and
Yeah,
for every 4 up, and it was a pull the way the Slaughter Priest or the Great Bray Shaman pulls are,
yep.
I think that would be pretty reasonable. And then
And
if
still reasonable for a triple. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, still very good for a triple. And so then everything except the Chimera would have been properly pointed at its old points
yep,
value, and
I
then you
agree.
would just have to put the Chimera up. And at 515, even with that change, it would be like not that good, right? So you'd want to put it
Yeah,
up to, a little bit higher than, or sorry, lower than that, like
yeah.
480, 475, something like that. So I agree with you. They're all really paying for Dragon Maul just being um, just written just very, very uncharacteristically poorly. I'm generally
For
pretty
Warcry, yeah.
impressed at the rules writing in this game, and that ability just seems like someone copy pasted. I don't know, someone just didn't read it. Someone just didn't. It never even occurred to them that it could be used. I don't know. I don't know what happened with that ability, but it's so bad.
I agree. And the thing is it's so good that you don't even read any of the other triples for a monster.
Yep.
Who cares?
Or
Who
for
cares what they are?
chaos.
Yeah,
Because
right? Oh yeah,
honestly,
for
if
chaos.
you were
Yeah.
trying to win in Chaos, the correct thing, because they had all the best monsters, right? They had
Yep.
chimeras, but also like Gorgons are like the second best monster, and
Right.
Cygors are
Right.
the third best monster. And so,
Yeah.
like, they
Yeah,
had all the
totally.
best monsters. And so you're just dragging and mauling. And that's like, why play a Chaos ability other than that? Now, actually, there is one Chaos ability that people were playing enough that GW noticed and nerfed it,
Uh-huh.
and that was lead from the back, which
Oh
was
yes.
also nerfed in this FAQ. Maybe we can get through that and the Tempest Eye ability quick before we're done. But lead from
Yeah.
the back went from adding half the number or half of the ability in attacks, so potentially +2 attacks, potentially +3 attacks. It now
Yep.
only adds 1 attack in a still pretty reasonable bubble. I think it's a 6-inch bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, add 1 to the attack's characteristic within 6 inches of this fighter. So much, much weaker now. Obviously, like
Mhm.
1/3 of the quality as before. But it was sort of one of the things that people were doing in a lot of their chaos factions. I
Yeah.
don't think it was overwhelmingly good or really needed a nerf, but it was very good, and it was
Right.
something that Corn and Iron Golems in particular were using to great effect because they
Yep.
had the profiles that combo with it really well. Like you want things like the Askерgen True Blades actually, but you want
Yeah. Yeah.
low attack, high damage, and a couple factions had that and were making great use of Skaven allies. Um, Kind of too bad because I think Skaven in general just really, really stumble from that. They were not doing particularly scary things anyway. So
Yeah.
that hurts
You
for
rem-
Skaven, but
yeah, it reminds me of Age of Sigmar when I first started playing. I had a whole bunch of Grimghast Reapers, right?
mhm.
And they were good in the Night Hunt faction. They were amazing in the Legions of Nagash faction because you could
Oh,
keep bringing them back.
right.
And
Uh-huh.
so, because people kept using them in Legion of Nagash, they upped the point cost for them overall, which made them unplayable in Night Hunt. And I'm like, well, that sucks because they're a
Oh,
Night Hunt unit. You know what I mean? And like
yeah.
they were like okay in I mean, they were good in Night Hunt, but they were phenomenal in another faction. And so I feel like this is the same thing here,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Where it was good in Skaven, and Skaven needed that to be competitive. But now because other people were using it where it wasn't intended
Mhm.
necessarily, they kind of nerfed the whole thing, and now nobody gets to play with the ball, right?
And
So
so now any hope of doing something in Skaven other than like well, any hope of using the cheap fighters in Skaven
right.
is just completely gone because you're
Yep.
not sort of boosting them or pumping them. There's still some really expensive fighters that are good, like Storm Fiends are good, Rat
And the
Ogres are
rat ogres,
good,
yep,
Death
yep.
Masters are good. They've got good fighters. You can make really good Skaven warbands, but man, like they were not abusing this ability
No.
to see it busted up like this hurts for them, but I get it. I don't think
Yeah.
GW was necessarily wrong for making this change. I think
Right.
the ability was kind of standing out a little bit more than it needed to.
Yep. Tallest blade of grass there, right? Gets
Yeah,
cut first. So
yep. And
and it
the same's
similar
true
with the
here.
Tempest Eye.
Yep, for Tempest Eye. Swift as the Wind now is like every other movement ability, and it was
Hmm.
weird that it wasn't before.
Yeah.
But um, until the end of the battle round, add half the value of this ability rounding up to the move characteristic. So they had already done this with, say, Wa, and then
Yep.
the Flesh Eater Quartz one. It was working like Tempest Eye. They clarified that in the previous FAQ, and now they came for Swift as the Wind, getting them
Yeah.
all kind of in line with each other. I think it's for the best for the game. Um, I was sad because I was using it in the old way, but also I never ever rolled fives or sixes, so it
Right.
doesn't affect me that much. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, it was great while it lasted, right? And I mean, it makes sense in the way that the algorithm is pointed towards movement that they don't want to give a bonus that like counteracts that, right?
right.
Because I think one of the biggest thing is you would find a lordling or something like that that was like 100 points
Yep, yep.
that could do this, and you just throw him in there and let him like basically make all your people move like crazy. So
Or you could just have because the cheap fighters or sorry, the slow fighters are so damage efficient point for point, you could just use dispossessed, which are the 3-inch move
yep,
dwarves,
yep,
and you could have dispossessed from Tempest Eye, and you wouldn't need to run any fast fighters in your list. You could just
right,
only use 3-inch move fighters in order. You could like have a dispossessed hero and then a bunch of annihilators, or a dispossessed hero and a bunch of fire slayers, and
right.
you could cover the board like a fast warband with no fast fighters. And so all of your fighters had the damage efficiency that slow fighters do, except you were fast. So anyway, wasn't making people feel good,
Yeah.
and I get it. So a lot of people were complaining that slow war bands combined with speed buffs were kind of too good, and now
Well,
the
yeah.
best speed buff has kind of been clipped.
So I think overall, this January FAQ that came out is like an A plus, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I mean, well, maybe I'll give it an A because, as you mentioned, maybe some of the monsters were not quite pointed
Heavy-handed,
100%
yeah.
accurately.
Mhm.
But I think it's an A overall because I do think it fixed some major issues, the movement issues here, the summoning issues that we saw, right? The shooting into melee with essentially a melee weapon.
Mhm.
Like all of these things I think were good, solid clarifications that all of a sudden changed the meta that we
Yeah,
had because we were looking at Graveguard spam, Chimera spam, maybe not Chimera spam, but spam in terms of like many lists having Chimeras, right?
right.
We were looking at Tempest Eye like allies, like being the ally to go to.
Mhm.
Um, so now I think what it's done is it's pushed the meta into a much more, it's got much more parity across the board. And now
Yep,
you're able to look at different allies that maybe you wouldn't before because there's no real obvious choice,
yep.
right? Like
Because
I'm not going to look at
everything that
specific
was
ones.
really popular and working well for a lot of different people has all been nerfed.
Yeah.
Even Gloomspite gets Destruction Soup. Their reaction now, we've missed this one, but their reaction
Mm,
only boosts other Gloomspite gets. So now souping with Gloomspite isn't as powerful as it was before.
right.
So yeah, totally changed the meta.
And I think in a good way, right? Like, because sometimes, and I've been around GW for a while now. Oftentimes when they make changes, sometimes it's not for the best. you know,
That's true.
sometimes they swing and they whiff badly. And not so with this. I feel like that there was some really legitimate thought put into the FAQ here, correcting some obvious mistakes, but also righting some, technical wrongs maybe that
Hmm.
now put us on some pretty good footing with each other. So now, I walked away from playing that Chimera list with my Bone Splitters list. I walked away from playing a Destruction Soup list and thinking, I've got a good Bone Splitters list that is competitive, but it's not a winner. It won't win.
Sure.
But now I think that Bone Splitters list can be a winner,
Yeah.
you know, and I
Yeah, I think
think
there's a
that
lot
that's
of
great.
approaches now that maybe wouldn't work before that could, which is cool.
hmm Yeah. So overall, very positive about this. I think it was done for the best. I feel bad for people who built their lists around certain things that just aren't there anymore, but there's still some very viable options, even with those same things. I mean, maybe not with a Chimera, but with a lot of other things, right? There's still a
Yeah.
lot of great options. And I can't wait to see what we get at Adepticon with this new FAQ, because I think it's going to be maybe one of the most competitive Warcry tournaments we've ever seen.
And our next episode is going to be the week before Adepticon, and I
Yep.
can't wait for us to give our predictions.
Oh, I know. I'm so excited for it. So, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in with us today. Dan, thank you as always. I know we went 2 hours, which is a little long, but we had so much to talk about. You and I
Yep.
were talking about this like a week ago or two ago, saying like we got so much to get through.
Yep.
But I appreciate everybody sticking with us and listening to the podcast today. As always, we appreciate your insights, Dan. And for those that are maybe not 100% familiar with Dan's work, go check out the Salty Sea YouTube channel. He's got a lot of great videos that are up there. I'll link it down in the description below on the YouTube channel, as well as the podcast show notes. Basically, like if you go in there, you should be able to see links to his podcast channel or YouTube channel as well. So with that, everybody have a great night. Feel free to leave in the comments what we're doing right or wrong, but have a great night and keep the dice rolling.